It's January 897 AD. A decomposing corpse is dragged out of its tomb, dressed in full papal vestments and seated on a throne in front of a screaming courtroom. A lawyer is appointed to speak on its behalf. The charges are read aloud, and the dead man says nothing, because he is dead. Welcome to the Cadaver Synod. The Church is complicated. Now, before we get to the part where a pope loses his mind entirely, we need to talk about the Catholic Church. Specifically, we need to talk about what the Catholic Church was in the 9th century. Because in the year 897 AD, the Church wasn't just a religious institution, it was the most powerful political force in all of Europe. Kings bowed to it. Emperors needed its blessing. If the Pope said you were going to hell, people actually believed him. And more importantly, so did your enemies. Which in 9th century terms means the Pope wasn't just a holy man in a fancy hat. He was basically the CEO of Europe with a direct line to God. And just like any powerful institution, the Catholic Church had one very big problem. Everyone inside it wanted to be in charge. Welcome to Rome. Population? Chaotic. By the late 800s, Rome is a city where noble families treat the papacy like a family business. Want to be pope? Better have the right last name, the right army, and the right amount of people willing to stab the current pope on your behalf. This brings us to two men, and their rivalry is going to end with one of them on trial. The first man is Pope Formosus. Formosus became pope in 891 AD and spent most of his reign doing two things. The first was trying to stabilize a deeply unstable Roman political situation. The second was making enemies at an absolutely legendary pace. He crowned Lambert of Spoleto as Holy Roman Emperor, then changed his mind and invited a rival king, Arnulf of Carinthia, to invade Italy and take the crown instead. In Pope terms, that is the equivalent of promoting someone to manager, then hiring their replacement while they're still sitting at the desk. Lambert and his mother Agiltrude were furious. Their allies in Rome were furious. Basically, everyone who had ever met Formosus had an opinion about him, and most of those opinions were not good. Then, in 896 AD, Pope Formosus died. Stroke. Gone. Problem solved, you'd think. Enter Stephen. Now, when a pope dies, the church elects a new one. Simple enough. After a couple of very short-lived papacies, and we're talking months here, not years, because Rome in the 890s was that chaotic, a man named Stephen VI was elected pope. And Stephen VI had one defining personality trait. He absolutely, catastrophically could not let things go. Stephen was a loyalist of Lambert of Spoleto, the same Lambert that Formosus had humiliated by switching emperors mid-reign. And Stephen, now sitting in the most powerful chair in Europe, decided it was finally time to settle the score, with a dead man. Stephen ordered the body of Formosus, dead for approximately 9 months at this point, to be exhumed from its tomb, dressed in full papal robes, and carried into a courtroom. A courtroom full of bishops, cardinals, and clergy. A courtroom where Stephen himself would serve as prosecutor. The charge? That Formosus had been unworthy of being pope in the first place. Now, you might be asking yourself, why does it matter if a dead pope was worthy? He's dead. Problem resolved. Why are we doing this? Great question. The answer is politics. You see, if Formosus was declared an illegitimate pope, then every decision he ever made as pope becomes invalid. Every bishop he ordained, unordained. Every crown he granted, ungiven. Including, very conveniently, the crowning of Arnulf of Carinthia as Holy Roman Emperor, which would leave Lambert of Spoleto as the only legitimate emperor. This wasn't about justice. This wasn't about God. This was a political hit job, with a corpse, the trial. And so, in January of 897 AD, the Cadaver Synod began. The body of Formosus was propped upright on a throne at the front of the room. A deacon was appointed to stand beside the corpse and speak in its defense, which must have been one of the worst job assignments in the history of employment. Stephen paced the room. He screamed accusations at the body. He demanded answers. He pointed directly at the decomposing face of his predecessor and listed crime after crime after crime. The corpse, as corpses tend to do, said nothing. The bishops in the room, all of whom were personally selected by Stephen and very aware of what happened to people who disagreed with Stephen, unanimously agreed. Guilty. Formosus was found guilty of perjury, of coveting the papacy, and of violating church law by switching dioceses without permission. His punishment? Well, he's already dead, so they got creative. The papal vestments were ripped from the body. The 3 fingers on his right hand, used for papal blessings, were cut off. He was stripped of all titles retroactively, declared to have never been a legitimate pope, and his body was thrown into a common grave for foreigners. Not even a proper Roman burial. The people have thoughts. Now, the clergy in that room may have been too afraid to speak up. The people of Rome were not. The reaction to the Cadaver Synod was immediate and violent. The Roman population was horrified. Riots broke out in the streets. There are historical accounts suggesting that during the proceedings, an earthquake struck Rome, which the people took as a fairly clear divine review of the whole situation. The political situation collapsed almost immediately after the trial. Lambert of Spoleto, the man this whole circus was performed for, did not exactly ride off into the sunset as the unquestioned Holy Roman Emperor. Instead, the chaos Stephen had unleashed made everything worse. A few months after the Cadaver Synod, Pope Stephen VI was arrested by the Roman people, stripped of his papal robes, thrown in prison, and strangled. The aftermath speedrun. Here's what happened next, very quickly, because Rome does not slow down for anyone. The body of Formosus was fished out of the Tiber River by a monk, who reportedly witnessed the corpse performing miracles on the riverbank, because of course he did. Formosus was reburied with full papal honors. The next pope, Theodore II, held a synod that lasted exactly 20 days and officially annulled the entire Cadaver Synod. Every ruling canceled. Every invalidated ordination reinstated. Then, Theodore II died. The pope after him, John IX, held another synod confirming everything Theodore had just done, and officially destroyed all records of the Cadaver Synod. Except, unfortunately for everyone involved, people had already written about it, extensively. Because when you put a dead body on trial, people tend to remember it. Lambert of Spoleto, the man whose political interests started this whole thing, died later that same year, falling off a horse. Arnulf of Carinthia, the man Formosus had crowned as emperor, had already suffered a stroke during his Italian campaign and was politically finished regardless. Formosus, the dead man at the center of all of this, was rehabilitated, reburied, and is now remembered as a legitimate pope by the Catholic Church. And Stephen VI is remembered as the man who held the most unhinged trial in the history of Western civilization. The closer. In the end, the Cadaver Synod accomplished nothing. Every ruling was overturned. Every alliance it was meant to protect collapsed anyway. The man it was performed for died falling off a horse, and the pope who ordered it was strangled in a prison cell a few months later. All that chaos, all that desecration, all those screaming bishops staring at a 9-month-old corpse in a courtroom, for absolutely nothing. Which, in 9th century Catholic Church terms, means completely standard Tuesday.